Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Meeker. I'm the General and Artistic Director of Opera San Antonio. And welcome back to those of you who have been with us for our journey through Beyond the Production, our bi-weekly live interview series. And as you can all see, there's someone else here with me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Burrich, the General Director and CEO at Austin Opera. Welcome to all of you that on Fridays are typically tuning into Live from Indy, Terrace. This is a special joint episode of Opera San Antonio's Beyond the Production and Austin Opera's Live from Indy, Terrace to celebrate the new digital production of The Impresario. And The Impresario is a new production, a co-production of Houston Grand Opera and Austin Opera, directed by this brilliant woman here, Lauren Meeker, who is also the General and Artistic Director of Opera San Antonio, as you just heard. So typically, Lauren, on your show, you're the one conducting the interviews. Today, we're going to turn the tables on you. I'm going to interview you. And then after we talk about the Impresario, we're going to welcome another wonderful colleague of ours, Afton Battle, who is our newest partner in the Texas Opera Alliance. She's the new general director at Fort Worth Opera. So starting with The Impresario, this is a one-act comedic opera by Mozart about an impresario. And an impresario, as I'm sure many of you know, is the head of an opera company. Today, they typically call us general directors. The Impresario is about the head of an opera company and two dueling sopranos who are competing for the position of prima donna within that opera company. But this production is so cleverly updated to present day Texas. And this premiered on Marquee TV last Friday. And all the characters in this production have new names from the character names you may know if you've seen traditional productions of The Impresario. The most important update, in my humble opinion, Lauren, is that the Impresario is no longer Frank, or Frank, I guess, in the original German. The Impresario is now a woman named Edna, and I just think that's a really big update, given that 3 of the general directors out of the 5 in the Texas Opera Alliance are now women.
And a yoo-hoo for that. I agree. I think it's really brilliant as well, and that made it really fun to work on.
So tell me about some of the other updates and the other kind of characters and how they've taken different shape in this new production.
Sure. So I think for anybody who might generally know or not know about Mozart's original construction, basically the idea of doing an audition is something that I think is a universal theme no matter what time period you put it in. So this is a piece that's had a variety of adaptations or language changes or updates, since it was conceived. Patrick Summers actually called me at the beginning of the pandemic, and the idea was really birthed from him. So hats off to Patrick for thinking women forward.
Yes, thank you, Patrick.
Patrick Summers, thank you. And Patrick said, are you familiar with the piece? And I had to admit I was not particularly. But he said, I really want to make it applicable to the times we are living in and how art can survive, and the fact that so many of the auditions that we're having to go through in the opera industry right now are via Zoom. So, or digital auditions. So is there a way we can take this audition opera that Mozart created, bend it on its ear and update it? And I said, yeah, great. Absolutely. I think that's fantastic. And he quickly also brought in Jim Lewiggs, the librettist, to be able to then magically make that happen. And one of the very first things that, as I had mentioned, Patrick talked about was that this should be a woman, very specifically a Texas woman who runs the company. And so the viewpoint should really be through her eyes. And her name is Edna Mendenhall, not Frank. It should really be through her eyes of not only how the company can stay afloat, and her company's name is Texas Grande Opera, but how her company can stay afloat and push art forward and help artists, both those artists who she knows and has worked with at the company, and also trying to broaden horizons for new artists. And so we really ended up with a fabulous story that I think lends itself to what all of us are going through right now.
It's very, very current. And Lauren, you and I are both transplants from the Northeast, correct?
Yeah, I'm a Boston girl.
My family is from Philadelphia. And so I don't know that we consider ourselves to be Texas women quite yet, but we are well on our way. I've been here just a few years longer than you. We do have a Texas woman coming up later on the show with Afton Battle. So as you said, the opera is about these competing sopranos who are competing, via auditioning, and the whole opera takes place on a Zoom call. I think only 2 of the characters are actually in the same room together. Right. But Lauren, you handled this so deftly, and that the aggregate product, it does not feel static or boring or stationary like all of the Zoom calls that we're typically on all day are. So how did you achieve that with your direction?
That was maybe, Annie, at the onset, my biggest concern about this project, because even when we were conceiving it, this would have been way back in May, when Zoom was out there, I immediately was like, I'm bored. Okay, how? So if this is the concept of the project, how can it not be that? And so one of the things we started talking about early on was, okay, there are going to be some sections where we have all of the characters together, where we need to be in some kind of conferencing platform like Zoom. But there's also really an opportunity, especially for the whole front half of the film, to see these characters outside of just the interface and really see them in their room or see them in their office. And so I worked really hard with the brilliant film editors and camera crew and director of production, and a big shout out to Daniel at HGO as well, who helped with this, to make sure that we could create those 2 environments. Okay. And therefore give us a vocabulary where the audience today doesn't feel like they're literally just watching a Zoom call, but you're really seeing this hybrid film that's part Zoom call, part sitcom, part movie. And I think it allows it to move in an unexpected way that keeps it really entertaining.
I agree. I think we have a clip of one of the famous trio from the Impresario that we can share now.
Now, Edna, you've had a lovely morning here, listening to these 2 brilliant young singers.
And don't tell me, you just happen to represent them both?
Aren't I a lucky man?
Since when do you represent Yolanda, too?
Ever since you raved about her last summer at Aspen. No one spots new talent like you, Edna. So I made it my business to sign her up.
And now, I suppose you're planning to charge me for my own discovery?
You bet I am. So, shall we put Rona down for your gold cast and Yolanda down for the silver?
And now you're producing too, Wiley.
Just promoting, Edna, just promoting. So what do you say, ladies? Any reason we shouldn't cut ourselves a deal right here?
Fine by me, Wiley.
As long as I get the gold cast.
I've already sung the role, Mrs. Mendenhall.
Now, wait a minute.
And here we go.
There's more to Violetta than a high E flat on a divan. This kind of art requires heart. And it's my part. A handkerchief, a chiffon paper. Whatever make a rat a riddle.
Let's put this down to
certain we can do it.
so pay no attention. Please, what a display of presentation, please. Please, it's
all right, then fine, there's no use fighting and for we both can play.
What welcome news! You're quite insightful, your tat, in fact, is most delightful. So, Edna dear, our ardors clear.
Nothing, everything has also worked so.
You're quite insightful,
I really
your tat, in fact, is most delightful. So let's see, let's see. It's my wish, I will stifle our
silver thrillingly, the traviata, the traviata.
Yes, you both retract and earn your gravels if I'll collect for those centavos.
Yeah, I'm so happy to see that again.
Oh my gosh, I've watched it several times since it was released on Friday. We should probably right now take a moment to recognize the incredible artist that we just saw on the screen. So in the role of the impresario, Edna Mendenhall is Nova Thomas.
Yes.
The amazing Nicole Heaston, if you saw Vinkensport, which Lauren also directed, she was in that, and now she's Yolanda Cantrell. Raven McMillan is just a stunning coloratura as Rona Richards. I love Freddie Ballantyne as Wiley Stonecrop. And this is a bit of a twist in this update, in that Wiley is an agent for two singers. And that is very much how these things work. And as I say, you've got agents negotiating often for two singers at the same time. And although he wasn't singing in this clip, in the background as Bowie is William Gwambo Sue. Such a terrific cast. And it was Yoon Sun Kim, who's the principal guest conductor at HGO, that conducted members from the HGO orchestra, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, you know, it was extraordinary to be able to work with all of these artists. Big hats off to HGO for having their extraordinary young artist program that Raven and William are both a part of. And of course, you know, to have folks like Nova, who I know from other jobs that we've done together in the past, and to work twice with Nicole was pretty extraordinary. And Sun, you know, to have that opportunity to be back in the room with these artists, that was maybe the most fulfilling thing of these projects, is actually to be working again, which is part of what the story is all about.
Exactly. So at the end of the opera, there are a number of cameos. We're not going to share that clip. That will be a surprise when people get to enjoy the full opera. The Impresario does have a happy ending. It is a comedy. But there's also some really serious and poignant layers that come at the end of the piece. Can you talk about your vision there, and maybe what Patrick had in mind as well when he envisioned this new libretto?
Yeah, so we had discussions very early on about how to really come up with a theme for the piece that we could drive towards by the final ensemble. And it became really important to the team to literally use Jim's lyrics to talk about art is alive, that art can thrive, even in extraordinary circumstances. And so with that in mind, as we unraveled what it meant to be, not even just in an audition, but on a Zoom call, conversations started to brew about, oh, hey, have you ever been on a call and like all of a sudden somebody just appears? You didn't know the link was shared with them, you know, but here they are. And how exciting is that to see faces you maybe haven't seen in a while? And when that idea came up, Patrick then said, you know, we work with so many phenomenal colleagues, in particular at HGO. I wonder if people would be willing to do angel appearances for us. And if there was a way to structure those cameos into this final ensemble so that art being alive is not just about the original 4 folks on the call, but becomes a much broader call to action from the operatic community. So then I think we sent, our HGO sent crazy emails to all of these artists, you know, like Joyce DiDonato and Francesca Zambello and, you know, you name it. And we sort of put the feelers out and said, could you send us like a 2-minute clip of you just staring angelically into your camera? And I think some artists were like, I don't know what the heck is going on. But ultimately, you know, we got some really fabulous people involved that we could drop into this Zoom call, like surprise angels who are joining the effort to keep our industry moving forward. And I think it's really phenomenal to see them joining all of that when we reach the end of the opera.
I love that. I hadn't heard the term angel appearance.
Yes.
Right? But that is exactly what it feels like.
We used cameos was exactly where the conversation had started. And then I think by the time we actually started to say to folks, hey, would you join us in this? We developed the term opera angels, and that sort of has stuck ever since.
I love it. All right, Lauren, so if you will allow me to brag on you for just a bit.
Okay.
You are a very, very experienced, very in-demand, very well-respected stage director. You have directed at Lyric Opera of Chicago, Houston Grand Opera, of course, but even before the pandemic age, Glimmerglass Opera. For those of you watching from Austin Opera that attended our patron trip to Glimmerglass Opera 2 summers ago, we saw Lauren's gorgeous production of The Cunning Little Vixen. So that was Lauren Meeker. You've directed at Washington National Opera, Florida Grand Opera, Dallas Opera, San Francisco Opera, Atlanta Opera. You've directed across the world from South America to Singapore. And my question for you is, did any of that prepare you to direct a digital production during a pandemic?
Oh, wow. Great question. Yes and no. So because we're still working within an opera company, what helped, with all of that vast experience was going, okay, I know how the company's going to approach this. The unknown was, what does it mean to be a film director versus an opera director? And that impacts everything from how to work and coach the artists, to develop the schedule, to talking to the film team. And where I got really lucky, Annie, and this was an accident, was that Vinkensport came first in the schedule of what we were doing. So the fact that I got to unite with Ryan McKinney on that project and jump through all of those hurdles before we had to start the process then for Impresario, I think is what allowed me to take more rather than less successful steps with Impresario. Now, the two projects are not the same. There were still things that were vastly different about them, but there was at least one show under my belt. And I learned, even simple critical things like, if you're on stage and you're facing on an angle and your conductor's in front of you, you can do an eye cheat on stage that is not as visible in a huge theater, but if I do this on camera, like, it's huge, right? So much of it was like about size and scale and scope of how to act for the camera. And that's a huge learning curve for me. It's a huge learning for opera artists. And then there's the whole, where do you put the cameras? How do you structure the schedule? You don't shoot in order. It's not the continuity issues left and right. I will keep learning, but it's basically like these two projects were a crash course in graduate film school is what it sort of felt like. And I'm eager to continue that.
I think anyone working in opera right now feels like we've been on a unending crash course on a number of subjects. But I know we were really grateful too, because our Sarah and Ernest Butler principal conductor, Timothy Myers, conducted Vinkensport. And we were so grateful as an organization that we had one of our embedded artists embedded on this project at Houston Grand Opera. So we just gained that experience of how does this unroll and how does this work, not only for film, but all the health and safety protocols. That's an entirely new world for all of us. Can you tell us a bit about what that was like on set?
Yeah. So, Houston Grand, I have to say, was really extraordinary in terms of putting procedures in place to keep us all safe, from orchestra rehearsals to artist rehearsals in the room to the actual capture process on stage. And if anybody wants to take a stroll through time on my Instagram feed or on Opera San Antonio's, you'll see images of some of what the setup was like. We always were masked. We had, until we got to the capture, and I'll talk about that in a second, but we were always masked. We do weekly COVID tests. If there were multiple artists in the room in the initial stages, there's plastic screening around everybody. Everybody was 6 feet apart with the exception of the two characters that play in the same frame. I mean, the list goes on and on and on about cautions, the precautions that were put in place to keep us really safe. And there's a whole different series of rules when we were upstairs in rehearsal versus what could be done downstairs. I wasn't allowed on stage. I wasn't allowed in the back dressing room. Communicating with the artists was entirely different than it's ever been before because there's so much space. I felt like that terrible God Mike only director, sometimes because there's, it really, and it just was an entirely different environment. But again, if that's what it takes, A, to keep people healthy, and B, to make art happen, sign me up. I'm on board. Let's make it happen.
Absolutely. I know you also brought for us a great little film that HGO put together that has captures a lot of the behind the scenes things that went into the production. So it'd be great to show that now as well, so we can all get a view from your God Mike.
Yeah, fantastic. The Impresario, as envisioned for 2020, takes Mozart's classic audition opera and updates it for the pandemic that we now find ourselves in. In Mozart's setting, an impresario, the male head of a company, is holding an audition between two warring divas. Patrick Summers came to me very early on in the pandemic with an idea he had been brainstorming with Jim Lewiggs, who's our librettist, about taking Mozart's setting and updating it into a Zoom audition. So we've now used that nugget of an idea, which is in fact what's happening in the opera industry right now. Most young artists, some professional artists, are doing their auditions over Zoom or other conference platforms.
I'm Nova Thomas, and I'm playing Edna Mendenhall. My character, Edna, is the impresario, in this case, impresaria. She's head of this opera company that finds its home in Texas. She is cherishing and nurturing her prima donna friend, who's been an established artist with the company, while forwarding everything and inviting new talent to join as well.
Stand by, Nova. Action.
You know how dry the stage always is, Judy. Judy, where are you? Come on!
She is a passionate, wry, witty, strong-willed woman in an administrative role. She's head of this company, and she's determined to keep things moving forward, cherishing the old while inviting the new. So it was interesting in developing the character and creating this character. Both Jim and Lauren Meeker, our director, wanted to be sure that she was Texan and not Southern.
Art and commerce are a marriage, and in marriage compromise makes a much more perfect union. One hand washes, one hand dries.
Our process for Impresario is unique in that it feels like it's part typical rehearsal process for an opera and part film production process. So when we started this, and the whole thing is about 2 weeks, when we started this 2 weeks ago, we were in a rehearsal room, socially distanced, which feels a little different for all of us, but really working through the beats of a piece in a manner that's quite similar to how we would do a normal opera process.
We are all very respectful of the needs during this time. We wear masks all of the time. We rehearse in mask. We have stations that we make our own. Typically, artists sit together and share stories and talk, and we each have tables that are about 20 feet apart from each other, and those are our home stations.
The Impresario and this version of it is meant to be done through the Zoom platform. We're getting used to working with Zoom in rehearsal. We're getting used to where camera angles will be. The staging of it is tighter for a smaller frame than I work say downstairs at the Cullen with an enormous 40-foot opening on a proscenium. I'm bracing us as best I can and rehearsing us as best I can for when we go downstairs into the theater, which we are treating like a sound stage. So we will have an entire set, an entire recorded orchestra track, and cameras all ready to capture what we will be doing on stage. There's a lot of work that will go into the post-edit to really allow this to feel not just like a staged film, not just like a Zoom audition, but really a movie that flips in and out of multiple realities to help bring these characters to life.
Oh, darling, you can trust me on that. She's very nervous.
Does she know I'll be listening in today, Edna?
Oh, heavens no. This is our little conspiracy of silence.
Well, I think it's for the best.
This has tons of dialogue, and so there is actually more dialogue than music, which is fun, or there's as much dialogue as music.
And it's rare even today in any opera house that the full original German dialogue and German lyrics are sung. More often than not, it's updated. So we knew we had a piece that was ripe with opportunity to create a story that was unique in the pandemic.
Yay! Oh, it's so fun to see what was happening on the physical stage and contrast that with what we see in the digital production.
Yeah.
Raven McMillan is just killing me. She is so funny.
Okay, so I have to say, I mean, I know that was a repeat of information for some folks, but I think seeing it makes such a difference. Raven is extraordinary. She was like a fish in water on this whole process. I mean, she knew how to work that camera. She knew how to be the right scale and scope in terms of her expressions are just incredible. I mean, and of course she sounds phenomenal. So yay for Raven. Big hats off to her.
So you can see the Impresario for free on Marquee TV. I believe it's there through the end of December, probably till December 26th or 27th. We also have several showings here in Austin at Blue Starlight Drive-Ins. Unfortunately, all of those showings they're fully sold out. They're fully reserved.
Yay, yay for you.
Yeah, we do look forward to seeing many of you at the drive-in. But if you don't already have a spot for that, you can head right over to Marquee TV, a wonderful platform. Okay, and so with all this talk about female impresarios, Lauren and I felt that this episode could not go forth without inviting our wonderful colleague, Afton Battle, the new general director of Fort Worth Opera. So let's welcome Afton onto this call.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I loved watching the first part of the show. It brought back so many memories for me personally. When I was at the University of Houston studying, I was a stage manager at one point because I wasn't singing on stage. And one of the shows I was a stage manager for was Impresario. And I know Nova from Westminster Choir College, and I know Nicole Heaston, and so watching that just brought back a huge flood of memories.
I too was involved when I was in college in a production of the Impresario. We did a studio production, and I was Golden Trill, so that's the Nicole Heaston part. And she's so much better than I was.
She's watching right now. So hi to Nicole. She's hanging with us right now. So props to her.
Hey, Nicole.
Great. So Afton was named general director of Fort Worth Opera this past September. And Lauren and I were just thrilled to welcome her to the Texas Opera Alliance. Afton had a very successful run as an opera singer early on in her career. That's actually how the two of us met. We were young artists together at Des Moines Metro Opera, which was 17 years ago. I did the math, Afton. That's something. 17 years ago. And then Afton transitioned into the business side with a number of really interesting and prestigious administrative positions in the arts. And as I mentioned earlier, of the three of us, Afton, you're the native Texan. And so tell us about your journey back to Texas and into your new job.
Yes, I am the native Texan, born and raised deep in the heart of Texas. It was a real journey, truly. In about 2015, I started working in nonprofit arts management, having worked in higher education for quite some time as in advancement and development. And so I started out with a small but very amazing visual arts museum in Chicago, and started making my way. And I've really, for the long haul, wanted to get back into opera. because I just miss the art form. It's who I am. I'm a singer, and it took a solid 10 years really to get there. Um, and luckily, I feel like the universe just really opened up these two paths where the opportunity of Fort Worth Opera met the destiny of me not being employed and, really actively searching for something. And it just blossomed into this beautiful moment. And coming back to Texas was never an agenda item for me. I didn't rule it out, but it wasn't something that I was actively looking for. But I'm really lucky because my family lives in Fort Worth. So I have this embedded community already with my parents and my sister and my nephew and my brother, and the rest of the rest of my family still lives in Texas. So I'm really lucky in that way.
Well, and Texas is really lucky to get you back. And opera's lucky to get you back. We missed you for the few years while you were out, but you certainly came right back in, right on top, in a very, very important position at a wonderful company. What are you most excited about at Fort Worth Opera in your new position?
This is going to sound crazy, but I'm most excited about creating performing arts in the time of COVID. Like, that sounds crazy, but I think that we've learned so much because of what's been literally stripped away from us, right? We are so used to going into these theaters and packing them, and that's just been what we've cyclically done. And so now we're not able to do that. So we have to be creative and innovative with the way that we bring our art form to our audience. And it is by way of Winkensport, it is by way of Impresario, it is by way of the drive-in, and all of these ways that our colleagues have really found to do that. And so I'm most excited about that. Yes, I want to program an amazing season in Bass Hall, but really and truly, I also want our opera truck to be the flyest thing on the road. And I want us to get into, our community and really repair relationships, build bridges, and that community support. And I'm really most excited about that. And also, it allows us to bring a different flair of offerings, of musical offerings. Yes, some arias and some classics, but also Broadway and also, gospel. And, we had a young artist do some country on the back of our flatbed, and it's Texas, so why not?
Perfect.
So I'm super excited about that, but I'm also, excited about sharing with the company and building us up and going into our 75th anniversary year in 2021 and preparing for that. And I'm really blessed and honored, but excited to have this almost clean slate and canvas to really create whatever we want to.
Well, you've definitely hit the ground running. You've already staged so many interesting community performances. I was so impressed on election day when I feel that a lot of us working in opera just kind of slowly backed away. We said, maybe we won't email our patrons this week. We'll just try and let the dust settle and the dust clear. You guys went right at it, and you were performing at election sites, correct?
Yes, absolutely. It started off with our Fuogo launch, which was the latter part of October, and I was actually on a call with some colleagues from University of Houston, and I was thinking about, well, how can we bring some levity to the day? Because just like you said, Annie, I think a lot of people were just wanting to kind of, crawl into their own little space. But music is so healing. And I've been healed by music. We've all been healed by music in some way. And it's mentally, emotionally healing. And also it's a unifier. And so I thought, you know what? Let's pick some very specific polling sites where we can reach audiences that most definitely would not have otherwise been reached by the opera at this time, of course, and go out and just bring some levity to the day. Give them something to listen to while they're waiting in line to cast a vote or coming out of the polls, to bring some joy and some beams of light to that. And so we created Voices for Votes and went out on election day and hit about 4 sites in the city and really had a great turnout and some really wonderful media and response around it. And I think it was a great way to engage our audience around this time, but also to bring some joy to that day.
Yeah, I think it was brilliant. Lauren, you were in your job how many months before this all happened?
Well, technically, I started on January 1. So,
oh my.
So it's funny. I just had someone ask me the other day, like, this has to be extraordinary. I can't imagine hitting the ground running and leading a company during COVID. Afton, I'd be curious to hear what you say, but my response was, I don't know any different. I hit this, and it basically was, figure this out. All the gloves are off. This is all new territory. And thank goodness for colleagues like both of you and the Texas Opera Alliance for creating opportunities. We're the smallest company of the Texas Opera Alliance. And to have this union that allows us to thrive in circumstances where otherwise we might not have, that's just the world I live in. When I'm grateful, I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, you know what? Silver lining. I probably, I am glad to have come into this position when I did, because as Lauren said, it's the only thing that I know. And if this is the only thing that, we know, then everything else that comes after this is literally going to be like a cakewalk, because we have had to come into this, like pit of, I don't want to say a fiery hell, but it's like pulling all the tricks out the bags and relying on colleagues like those of us in the Texas Opera Alliance, like those of us who, sit in on meetings with, Opera America, and pulling from all of our resources to say, hey, how can we we are all in this together, but how can we be of a resource to one another and draw from resources of other companies? And so it's all that I know. And truly, like, our opera truck is all that I know. And I have dreams of, Bass Hall and what that would look like. But, at this time, it is us and a truck and a trailer. And I don't think that I would really necessarily know how to do it any other way, if that makes sense, So I'm grateful for this crazy time of just hair on fire, figuring it out, because in a couple of years, maybe I can actually just sit back into it.
Right. That's the plan. That's the hope. I think the last in-person meeting that I went to was the first official meeting of the Texas Opera Alliance. And Lauren, you were there. We went to Houston in March. It was just 1 week before we shut everything down. And that first meeting really came about, I think, because we saw 2 big opportunities at that time. One was the opportunity to co-produce. We have 5 opera companies that are within driving distance for a couple semi trucks. And we started talking about what new productions are we all excited about mounting together, and the cost savings involved by being able to do them all together, or even in some cases, if we can line up the timing, even have some casts maybe only rehearse with one company, even the cast can move on to the next company. That was one thing we talked about. And the other thing we talked about is that there is already a lot of intercompany opera fan travel in Texas. I just got some new data yesterday that 12% of our audience drives more than 90 minutes to come see Austin Opera. So we know they're coming from adjacent markets. And we know that opera goers who go to operas at multiple companies, that's just nothing but great for all of us, because the more opera you consume, the more opera you consume. That's what the data said. And so we got together and we said, how can we encourage our patrons who already love to go to multiple companies? How can we make that easier and incentivize it and offer them the same welcome no matter which company they go to? And then the virus hit, and a whole new set of challenges and opportunities presented themselves, certainly.
Yeah, I think in that first meeting, Annie, I remember coming in and talking to you very specifically. I was like, are we worried about COVID? What's happening? And Annie was like, here's my spreadsheet, but we'll see how it goes. And literally the next week, it was like the world had changed.
Mhm.
But thank goodness, I think in some ways that meeting happened at that time because it put us in communication. It meant when the world did change that network of communication was already established. And then, of course, we could, just brainstorm ideas together. And then lo and behold, Afton arrives to up the game all over again. And if there's anything out there in the ether that, spoke to the timing of all of this or was helping that, shepherded from afar as an entity, thank you, because it's really been extraordinary to be a part of.
Well, and your two companies have already done some things together, right?
Yeah. I was just observing from the background, but Lauren was a part of our audition intensive series with Jennifer Rowley. And that was amazing. It was several months, maybe about 4 months, that she had this series, and Lauren provided a couple of master classes, which were invaluable. And the way that they set them up. And I think that the young singers, emerging singers really got a lot out of it. And what we learned from that entire series was our audience is craving or was craving that interactive type of virtual activity. Yes, we like to sit back and watch something, but the interactive part of being able to see something happen live and in person and hear the way that, a shift or a stage direction that Lauren would give or something vocally that Jennifer would say would change the outcome, and being it, like in a master class in a recital hall or a classroom, that we would be a part of. So I was really fortunate to be able to partake in those classes as just Afton, not Afton, the general director, and sitting in and watching them and being able to watch Lauren work in that way. Were there other collaborations that you've done with Fort Worth Opera before?
No, that was actually the first. And, again, the timing of that was just also extraordinary. So, Jennifer had been with us here at Opera San Antonio just last season as our Tosca. So it's sort of funny how those things fall into place. TOA was brewing. I knew Jennifer. She reached out. I said, hey, can this be something that we collaborate and partner on together? And that's actually something that I think is extraordinary about these 5 companies is each company has different resources with different leaders who do slightly different things. And man, is that incredible. So, I can put my stage director hat on, but then somebody else might know something more about marketing or development or I don't know, general directing in general since my first year. And so to be able to, call in those different resources and combine those efforts company to company, that's really amazing.
It really is. And it picks up, I've taken these tests that test your capacities and also your building infrastructure as an individual. So like, are you an executor? Are you a collaborator? Things like that. And it's not a deficiency, right? And we have individual things that we are all really good at individually, and then collectively you put those together, and it's like this powerhouse of, if you could, like an ideal company or an ideal situation that has all of the boxes ticked, like someone has a production thing that's really amazing, great video and audio and sound type of, lighting that can make something look studio film quality. Someone might have the composing element or, the artistic element where they have a composer on staff and on residency and can change things and make a new libretto that works in terms of it being set in Texas and all of that. And it is just this amalgamation of all of the best of what we have to offer each other coming together as this fountain of resources and knowledge. And I feel like we've only tapped the very top of it. Like we haven't even, we've only like popped the top a little bit and it's still fizzling. Like we haven't even poured the drink at all.
I love
Well, I was saying, I'm curious to hear from your perspective because, again, I don't think Afton and I know any differently. I'm so thrilled to be in an environment, yes, with Opera America, but also with TOA, where it does feel collaborative as opposed to territorial or no, my stuff is better than your stuff. And I don't know, Annie, if you've noticed a change in that or what TOA has done from your perspective, but I've always thought collaboration is like the way forward. And it seems like that's very true now more than ever.
I would agree. I've only ever worked in opera. I've worked my way up through opera, and I really do feel that with these, most recent classes of impresarios or whatever you want to call what the job that we do, I feel like my cohort, the two of you and those that have come into the job within the last 3 to 5 years. That there is an entirely new level of collaborative spirit. We all come into the job with different strengths. We came up through different departments. We typically all have some significant artistic background in it, but also enough business background to understand how challenging it is to gather up the resources necessary to put on this spectacular art form that we all just love and adore, or we wouldn't, throw ourselves at it every single day if we didn't believe in it and believe and what a powerful experience it can provide. And certainly the past few years, I'm the vice chair at Opera America. The days of feeling territorial or, if this happens in this market, then it can't happen in mine. Or if it doesn't have my own mark on it, it doesn't matter. It's gone, and we're all trying to figure out how do we make the best possible art that makes sense in our community with our audiences and pool resources to do it. And so I do think it's a very exciting time for the industry in general. But I'm also really proud that it was the Texas Opera Alliance, that the Texas companies that were the first group to kind of announce this and coalesce around this opportunity. And I will say that it was one of our colleagues over in Houston who was really a driving force behind this. Perrin Leach is the managing director at Houston Grand Opera. Now, he's been in the job a little bit longer than 3 to 5 years, but he does embody this collaborative spirit that we're talking about. We were a little dismayed, this past week to learn that Perrin is leaving Houston Grand Opera. He's going to be the general director at the Canadian Opera Company. And so we're thrilled for him. What a prestigious appointment. We're a little disappointed that we're not only losing him from the state, but losing him from the country. And Perrin has always been such a wonderful colleague of mine, a mentor of mine when that's what's been needed, or just a friend or a shoulder to cry on, when you're trying to figure out what to do, trying to do day to day. And I know you've worked with Perrin quite a bit, Lauren.
Yeah, Perrin knows me with a lot of my different hats on. Houston Grand Opera was one of the companies I started working back just as I was beginning my career as an assistant director. And so he's seen me assist, he's seen me choreograph, he's seen me come up into stage direction and now, of course, into general direction. And I would echo your sentiments, Annie, every single step of the way. He has been so open-hearted and not only just like with a company hat on, but as a person. His family is extraordinary. His heart is so big. And when I first started considering moving into administration, he was so generous with his time and so complimentary and really buoyed my spirits for how I could do this and be successful at it. I will always, always be grateful to him for that. And even though he's going to Canada and even though I'm dismayed, I'm sure that will continue, no matter where he is. And that's really speaks a lot to how extraordinary he is as a human being.
I'm so jealous that you all have had such great relationships and long relationships with Perrin. When I was appointed at Fort Worth Opera, he reached out to me pretty immediately before Texas Opera Alliance, but within the construct of it. But he was so supportive and so encouraging in my appointment. And then as Texas Opera Alliance continued to move down the road and formalize and everything, he was just such a huge champion about this new direction at Fort Worth Opera. And so I was totally bummed out when I read that he was leaving, because I was like, I feel like I did just meet you. And we had some really great Zoom calls when I was first around. I had one with him and Patrick Summers, which is a little bit of a blast from my past, having come up in my musical world in Houston and knowing so much, obviously, about HGO and Patrick Summers. And so having that call with the two of them, I felt a little bit like a giddy schoolgirl. And so, yeah, I was really bummed to see and to hear that he was leaving, but so proud and happy for his appointment. I don't think that, from what I do know of Perrin, I don't think that anyone else would be, they are lucky to have him. And we are lucky to have had him for as long as we had him in Texas. And so I do look forward to keeping in touch with him and following what amazing things I know that he will do, and we all know that he will do with Canada Opera. But I think a little bit of his heart still will be in Texas, I hope.
I would like to think so. Yeah, whenever I call Perrin and I'm trying to work through something, he always says, "Burridge, you got this. Burridge, you got this. You go get it, Burridge." And so I have to figure out like an international phone plan or something, so he can tell me that from Toronto. So yes, we wish Perrin all the best. We have other wonderful colleagues in the Opera Alliance. Of course, Patrick Summers is still in Houston. Ian Dare at the Dallas Opera is a wonderful, also hugely enthusiastic champion and supporter and friend to us. And so the Texas Opera Alliance, we've got a lot of irons in the fire. Stay tuned, everyone. Afton and Lauren, thank you so much for doing this joint episode today. This was so much fun. The two of you inspire me so much, and I'm so glad that we could get together for this episode.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Annie, somebody's asking a good question in the comments. Okay. Darla is saying, if we just have a second here, Darla is saying, could Texas Opera Alliance be a resource for Texas-based yaps? And
is that Darla Diltz?
That's Darla Diltz. Do you know Darla Diltz?
I do indeed.
Oh, well, then do you want to take it away? Afton, do you want to field this question?
I think that it totally could be a resource for Texas young artists. What I am really focusing on for our resident artists that we have now, but also looking into the new season, is how we can highlight and collaborate with local artists. I feel some type of way about asking artists to travel and assume that risk at this point, and getting on a plane, and so there's so much talent, and I can speak for Fort Worth and the Dallas area, North Texas, and Texas in general, but there's so much talent around us, and I really want to tap into that as a company. And so I think 1,000% that TOA could be, should be, and most, will be a great resource for young artists to be able to connect them with other artists in the area, to be able to be a resource as a company to young artists. And this is, me just speaking with, from Fort Worth Opera, but I think that it is a way that we can grow the alliance within the state further than we reach our own audiences in our respective cities. And I'll tell you how I know Darla. Darla and I went to the University of Kentucky together. She's a fantastic singer. We were both there, and now she, if I'm not mistaken, has an opera company that she works with in Wichita Falls. So I assume that might be where this question's coming from.
Gotcha.
It's a great question, and I think that the answer is definitely yes. And there are so many avenues to explore. Lauren and I have had conversations. Our companies were only really 90 minutes away from each other, and we have a pretty complementary production schedule. So there's lots of opportunity to invest certainly in local artists and talents within our region.
Yeah, and I think that explore is the great word for Texas Opera Alliance right now. It's such a new entity, and everything that's happening in COVID is so new, but it feels like, any thing we want to throw in the kettle to consider right now. That's just going to brew all sorts of great opportunities, whether that's young artist programs collaborating or productions or. So thanks for putting that on our radar, Darla. Also, Annie and Afton, I thought you'd like to see this. That's how Perrin feels about us. Amazing leaders, the future of opera on your screens right now. Proud to be your colleague, Perrin. So it sounds like the feeling's mutual. Thanks, Perrin.
When we can cross the border, I'm coming to Canada.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in today for this joint episode. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all, and thank you for having me, Annie. And it's great to see the two of you, and I'm just so thrilled to be in your midst. I draw inspiration from the both of you. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, likewise, Afton.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. We'll see everybody for Opera San Antonio in 2 weeks with another Beyond the Production. Annie, when do you guys have another live from Indy Terrace?
We have our final live from Indy Terrace of 2020 next week, and it's a beautiful holiday concert that our chorus filmed for us. So we'll look forward to that.
Awesome. Well, stay tuned, everyone. And thanks for joining this afternoon or for watching online later. We'll be back in touch soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.